10 years ago, a great sage revealed a prophecy. A young boy reaching out to catch a bug suddenly found himself bathed in a strange light. From that light emerged a girl and an old man. The girl introduced herself as Nokanatika and asked the boy, Satu Haruto, to keep this meeting a secret. In exchange, she promised to be his friend. From that moment, Satu felt an unshakable desire to protect her. 10 years later, Nokanatika wakes Satu up, having prepared breakfast for him. Satu narrates that they have been friends since childhood. As he looks at her, he realizes just how much she has changed over the years. She reaches out to wipe a grain of rice from his face. Later, they walk to school together, chatting with her grandfather along the way. Satu remembers the promise they made as children. Nokanatika once said she would marry him. In class, students are amazed by their exam results, and Satu notices that many of the boys are jealous of him. He then receives an invitation. At the festival, Satu and Nokanatika walk around together, reminiscing about how they used to hold hands as kids. They buy food, and Satu decides to play a game. He hesitates to take their relationship further, not wanting to risk their friendship. Just as he gathers the courage to confess his feelings, fireworks go off, interrupting him. Nokanatika, with a sad expression, tells him that she was unable to say something important as well. She then reveals that she and her grandfather will soon be leaving, returning to their homeland. She thanks Satu and says she will cherish their memories forever. Satu had always thought he knew everything about Nokanatika. That night, a glowing portal appears. Seeing it, Satu rushes toward Nokanatika. She is about to leave, explaining that she is actually a princess and is returning to her world for her upcoming wedding. Satu, confused about why he had chased after her in the first place, suddenly jumps into the portal. He finds himself in a grand castle, interrupting the wedding, but before anything can be explained, a monster from the abyss attacks. Desperate, she gives Satu her ring and kisses him, entrusting him with her power. A sword appears before him, and as he grips it, the blade glows with light. With a single strike, he cuts down the monster, but the effort drains him and he collapses. When he regains consciousness, Nokanatika asks if he remembers everything, subtly mentioning the kiss. She then explains that she was supposed to marry a prince to strengthen the alliance between their nations. But now, everything has changed. Satu is her chosen hero. The kingdom's leaders discuss the situation while awaiting an audience with the king. Meanwhile, Satu is introduced to the public. Nervous in front of the massive crowd, he declares that he has come to protect them and vows to be Nokanatika's hero. That evening, Nokanatika accidentally walks in on Satu while he is at the hot springs. She apologizes, but then expresses guilt for dragging him into this. She reminds him that he has no real connection to this world. However, Satu reassures her. He doesn't mind. He wants to protect her. Nokanatika recalls how she was bullied back in school, and how Satu always stood up for her. With a small smile, she admits that he has always been her hero. However, she clarifies that their marriage is only symbolic. Satu responds that he is happy she chose him. Then, with some hesitation, he confesses that he loves her, though only as a friend. Just then, the city is attacked by monsters from the abyss. The royal guards rush to Satu for help. Nokanatika reminds them that he has no formal training, but Satu declares that he will handle it. Grabbing his sword, he dashes forward into battle. The abyssal monsters attack the villagers, but Satu manages to save a girl. The old sage explains that the power granted by the ring depends on the strength of the marriage bond. He warns that Satu won't last long at this rate. Suddenly, a knight of the abyssal lord appears before him. Satu charges into attack, but the sage urges him to stop. The knight summons more creatures, forcing them to flee. The sage creates a stone wall and tells them where to go, but the knight appears on their way again. Prince Gisaris of Marmarugius intervenes, urging them to retreat. Satu and Nokanatika escape on a carriage. Gisaris formally introduces himself, and Satu thanks him. The sage explains that the abyssal lord is now hunting the Ring King, and only someone wielding the power of the rings can defeat him. To do that, Satu must collect the remaining 4 rings, by marrying their bearers. This revelation doesn't sit well with Nokanatika at all. When they arrive at an inn, they learn that only 2 rooms are available. Satu and Nokanatika end up sharing a room. As they discuss their next steps, the sage recounts the history of the abyssal monsters. Once they ravaged the world, plunging many nations into darkness. Then the first Ring King emerged, forging 5 rings to fight back. He won the battle, and the 5 princesses of that era passed their rings down to future generations, forming a sacred bond. Now it is the duty of the new Ring King to find the 5 princesses and seal the abyss once again. Nokanatika tells Satu not to overthink their situation, insisting that their marriage is just a formality. However, when she sees his injuries, noticing Seeing his wounds, she begins to cry and runs off. Satu searches for her and encounters Marmarugias, who tells him where she went. Marmarugias admits that he's relieved he didn't become the Ring King, and that he had suspected Satu came to this world for someone he truly loves. He apologizes and directs Satu to the garden. There, Satu finds Nokonataka. He confesses his love for her, saying that he cherishes her deeply and that she was the reason he followed her into this world. Nokonataka admits that she had tried to forget her past life and resign herself to marrying a stranger, but she's truly glad that Satu came for her. She acknowledges the hardships ahead, battles, pain, and the necessity of marrying other princesses, but promises to be honest with him. She wants to be his real wife. Back in their room, tension lingers between them. Nokonataka tells him she's ready to be his wife in every way. Satu pushes her onto the bed, but hesitates, questioning if this is the right way. He decides that their relationship should develop more naturally. Instead of rushing into things, he suggests they act as if they've just started dating. They share a kiss. The next morning, the sage questions their sleep, hinting that the strength of their bond directly affects the ring's power. They prepare to travel to the land of the elves. Satu asks about the elves, and the sage describes them as incredibly beautiful. Nokonataka declares that she will always be his first wife. However, the elf princess harbors deep hatred for the Ring King due to a long-standing grudge against humans. The elves, who live in a valley filled with immense knowledge, have isolated themselves behind a great barrier. As Satu and his group approach, a storm blocks their path. Suddenly, a massive bear charges at them. They barely manage to evade it before finding shelter. Two elves appear to meet them. Satu straightforwardly declares himself as the Ring King. Nokonataka explains that the different races aren't obligated to help him. The elves reluctantly agree to escort them, but warn that their princess will not be pleased. Satu, determined, vows to do whatever it takes to save the world. As they enter the throne room, the elven princess is revealed, hiding behind her throne in fear. She immediately notices that Satu and Nokonataka are already married, and bluntly asks if they've slept together. She continues pressing, asking if they've kissed, and then disgustedly remarks that touching someone else's lips is utterly revolting. An elf approaches Satu and his group, commenting that he hopes they now understand how modest their princess is. He introduces himself as the son of the previous king. However, the moment they recognize Satu as the Ring King, the elves raise their spears and take him prisoner. Locked in the dungeon, Satu meets Jade, the princess's older brother. Jade explains that his sister is incredibly sensitive. Satu, unimpressed, remarks that she's acting like a child. Jade warns him not to judge her so harshly. She deeply loves her older brother and has never left the palace. After leaving the underground prison, Jade speaks privately with his advisor, stating that they must not hand over the ring. Their priority should be protecting the city, not aiding the Ring King. Later, a girl visits Satu in his cell, asking why he is gathering the rings. Satu responds that he simply wants to bring happiness to the princess. The girl finds it strange that he's using such immense power just to make one woman happy. However, intrigued by his resolve, she decides to help him. She leads him to the Wind Temple, where one of the rings is kept. As they explore, someone else enters the temple, forcing them to hide. Meanwhile, the princess is speaking with her parents. She admits she is terrified of leaving the village, but feels she must face her fears. Just then, she spots Satu and the girl hiding nearby. When Satu steps forward and reveals himself, the princess faints on the spot. The elder of the village asks Satu to take Nefritis with him. Realizing the princess is missing, Jade launches a village-wide search for her. Meanwhile, Nefritis lies unconscious, and Satu recalls the elder's advice. He must be firm with her. When Nefritis finally wakes up, she is so overcome with fear that she throws up. Back in the village, the elder informs Jade that the princess has fled. The elder then tells Jade that Nefritis will likely never express how much she loves her brother again. He admits that, though everything he did was for Nefritis, he now realizes he may have been wrong. Jade insists that Nefritis is not obligated to accept the ring. Meanwhile, Nefritis, still feeling sick, apologizes to Satu for throwing up on him. They sit together, undressed, as she confesses that she is terrified of people, especially someone from another world. She then begins to ask Satu about his home, initially assuming it's filled with orcs. She also inquires about elves in his world. Satu explains that she's known as a recluse and has only ever read about other places in books, never experiencing them for herself. Satu admits that he was once just as ordinary, but took a leap of faith to follow the person he loved. Hearing this, Nefritis suddenly throws herself onto him, declaring that she wants to visit his world someday. Satu reassures her that he embarked on this journey for the sake of his beloved, and that he will never force anyone into marriage. As they leave the house, Nefritis surprises everyone by defending the Ring King. However, Jade refuses to listen, claiming she has been deceived. He insists that the ring must remain with their parents. This angers Nefritis, who storms off, frustrated that no one cares about her opinion. Jade warns Satu that kidnapping the princess will have consequences, but the village elder elder intervenes, stating that it was Nefridis' own choice. She promises to handle matters with the Ring King herself. Meanwhile, Crystal Novati expresses relief at seeing Satu safe, teasing that he has already grown close to the princess. Elder Peridot recounts the tragic history of the Wind Barrier. When the wall first formed, the princess of that time sealed herself within the palace. Nefridis' mother was never meant to inherit the ring. It should have gone to her sister. However, her sister fell in love with a human. Rumors spread that the man had seduced her only to obtain the ring. The more society condemned them, the stronger their love became, until the traveler mysteriously disappeared. The sage explains that the rings are symbols of authority. Elder Peridot urges them to consider the feelings of the princess, who once abandoned her homeland. She was cursed, and her fear only continued to grow. Nefridis' parents lived in constant fear as well, which led them to create the protective barrier around the village. They raised Nefridis under one strict rule: never leave the village walls. As Nefridis lies in bed, memories of her mother's voice resurface, reminding her to never, under any circumstances, leave the village. The sage tells Haruto that they need to leave immediately, as an abyss army is pursuing them. Staying in one place is not an option, but Haruto is deeply concerned about the princess's safety. Jade watches as the group departs, and is soon informed by scouts that the monsters have broken through the Wind Barrier, with a powerful creature responsible for the breach. The group spots the monsters as they continue to wreak havoc on the city. Amid the chaos, Crystal Novati kisses Satu, while the princess remains unmoving in her seat. The elder warns her that if she doesn't act, she deserves to turn to stone herself. The Abyss Knight arrives demanding the ring, and Jade tries to stop him but quickly realizes that the knight is far too powerful. He suspects this monster is the one who destroyed the city. As Jade faces certain defeat, the sage intervenes and saves him. Haruto, focused solely on protecting Nefridis, rushes into battle, despite knowing they have no chance of victory. Crystal, undeterred by the enemy's strength, continues to fight alongside him. Realizing she's not strong enough on her own, Crystal seeks out Nefridis for help. The elder arrives and reveals that the princess wants to bring Nefridis to them. When the princess finds her, she tells Nefridis she must marry Satu to save them all. Crystal reflects on how her own parents sacrificed their lives for the ring, and remembers the helplessness she felt. The princess explains that Nefridis' marriage to Satu is her only chance to protect everyone, as Satu fights to defend her home. With resolve, Nefridis agrees. The girls destroy the statues of their parents, reclaiming the rings, and Nefridis kisses Satu, placing the ring on his finger. Jade, seeing the barrier fall, realizes that the Abyss army will soon breach the city, but in that moment, the ring's power eliminates the monsters. Satu rushes into battle, controlling the wind to deflect an attack, and wounds the Abyss Knight. When Satu regains consciousness, he finds himself surrounded by the girls, who thank him for saving the village. Among them is the former elven princess, now free from the Abyss's control. She reveals that the Abyss Lord exploited the darkness in her heart, which led her to take the ring willingly. No one has seen the Abyss Lord himself, but his minions continue to destroy everything, and the threat grows stronger. Satu, exhausted, tries to stand but has no strength left. The elder tells him that his bond with the princesses gave him the power to fight, but warns that using such power has consequences. Later, one of the girls invites Satu to the hot springs where they relax together. Nefridis asks Crystal to teach her about love, to which Crystal replies that her love with Satu is real. They kiss often, and every night is filled with passion. The elder says she will watch over their love from a distance. Crystal then kisses Satu, pressing herself against him. Haruto, uncomfortable with the situation, gets up and states that he doesn't want anyone forcing him into anything. Meanwhile, Smaragdi asks the sage about her beloved. The sage gives her a pendant, explaining that he was familiar with him and couldn't bear to see her rejected by society, so he left. The next morning, Nefridis visits her parents' grave, saying that she will be okay from now on. Jade remarks that she has grown. As the group prepares to leave, Nefridis surprises them by saying that she will go with them. She wants to see the world beyond the barrier. The elder reflects that no ring bearer has ever found happiness. Peridot overhears the conversation and realizes that the sage, Alabaster, was her lost love all along. Crystal meets Satu and offers him a choice between a meal and herself. However, Satu surprises her by kissing Nefridis instead. Later, Nefridis wakes up from a nightmare and sees Satu feeding her. They discuss where to go next. Crystal notices how much time Satu spends with Nefridis and starts getting jealous. Just then, they spot a massive moving city. It's the land of the Fire Cat people. The locals lower a ladder and invite them inside. Nefridis is hesitant, but Crystal stays behind to watch over her. In the end, they climb aboard. Haruto is amazed by everything he sees. Inside the moving city, the streets are bustling with merchants selling all kinds of goods. This nation operates as a traveling caravan, constantly moving and trading. They decide to request an audience with the ruling princess. Meanwhile, the girls wander around but soon realize they are lost. Nephritis grows nervous, calling the cat people wild animals. A local woman offers to help, telling them to head toward the arena. Haruto worries about them, but the sage reassures him. As they walk through the city, Satu and the others notice how people keep staring at them. Meanwhile, a group of girls approaches the prince, trying to get acquainted, leaving Haruto confused. The girls tease him, saying that he needs to win the princess over. At the same time, Nephritis and Crystal try out the local food. Nephritis reflects on how similar Satu's bond with Crystal is to the relationship her parents had. Feeling guilty, she apologizes to Crystal for spending so much time with Satu. She admits that the stronger the love, the more fragile the heart becomes, and she hopes to fulfill her duty as a wife. They are eventually invited to the princess's chambers, where they witness her in the middle of a fight. The princess immediately recognizes Satu as the Ring King and challenges him to prove his worth as her husband. She declares that he has no chance of winning and tells him to come back tomorrow if he dares to try again. Satu and the prince train together and decide to take a short break. They learn that no warrior has ever been able to defeat the princess. Satu begins to doubt his chances of victory, considering using the power of the rings unfairly. As Satu watches a battle featuring Granart, who easily defeats her opponent, Crystal approaches him. She asks him to rest his head on her lap and rewards him with a moment of comfort. Nephritis notices this but remains silent. Crystal tells Satu that he doesn't have to bear all the responsibility alone. The power of the rings will be enough to win, but only if their bonds are strong. Satu finds the idea a bit embarrassing. Alabaster then calls Satu for training. He enters a bathhouse where the girls are getting massages. The prince comments on how hard Satu is working. Satu notices that the prince is an excellent swordsman and asks if he could defeat the princess. Before he can answer, the girls invite them to get massages. Satu doesn't refuse, but to his shock, a male masseur is assigned to him. Suddenly, the princess enters and introduces herself, asking Satu to help with her massage. She then asks what he thinks of her body. Satu observes that she is incredibly strong. She explains that every warrior who fights her only wants to become famous. But then the Ring King appeared. She assumes Satu will enjoy her body once he wins their battle. She admits that she's willing to lose on purpose as long as their fight is entertaining. However, she asks him to make it look real. Satu, determined, refuses to let her throw the match. He returns to training, realizing just how weak he still is compared to her. Satu wakes up with Nephritis beside him, greeting him warmly. She had slept next to him all night. She notices how exhausted he looks from pushing himself too hard to defeat Granart. Nephritis reminds him that he could just use the rings to win, but Satu refuses. She tells him that it's his choice to make. Determined, Satu continues training with the prince. The prince acknowledges that Satu has gotten stronger and advises him that the key to victory is studying his opponent's movements and striking when least expected. With this strategy, the prince estimates Satu's chances of winning have increased, though still only 1 in a million. Meanwhile, the girls discuss the relationship between Granart and the Ring King. They are surprised that Granart trusted Satu enough to let him touch her body. Crystal realizes that she can't let things continue like this. At the same time, a large crowd gathers for the upcoming battle, cheering for Satu. However, among them, a jealous man envies the Ring King and secretly puts on an abyss ring. Just as Satu and Granart prepare to fight, the match is interrupted by a Knight of the Abyss, who summons monsters. Granart's attendants rush to contain the situation while the girls engage in battle. Granart, eager for a worthy opponent, attacks the Abyss Knight, but her sword melts upon impact. Satu attempts to strike as well, but his attack does nothing. Granart, undeterred, declares that it's her duty to support Satu no matter how weak he is. Satu decides to risk his life and get close enough to extinguish the knight's flames. Channeling the power of the rings, he successfully suppresses the fire, allowing Granart to strike. Together, they defeat the Abyss Knight, stripping him of his black ring. With the monsters dealt with, Granart acknowledges that she underestimated Satu and happily declares that she wouldn't mind becoming his wife. Satu then challenges her once again to a proper match for the right to marry her. The princess agrees and sets the rules. The battle ends when one of them either surrenders or loses consciousness. As the fight begins, Granart launches an attack. Satu predicts she will strike from the right, but she instead attacks from the left, catching him off guard. Crystal doesn't understand why Satu insists on fighting when Granart had already accepted him. Nephritis explains that Satu isn't fighting for himself. He's fighting for Granart. The battle continues, and Granart urges him to use the magic of the rings, but Satu refuses, wanting to win on his own. In an unexpected move, Crystal yells out that if Satu wins, they will make love. At that moment, Satu hears a voice in his mind, allowing the rings to guide him in predicting Grenard's next move. The voice assures him that this power was earned through his own hard work. It warns him that Grenard will attack from above. Using this knowledge, Satu successfully counters her strike, winning the fight. The crowd erupts in cheers. Grenard kisses Satu and with great excitement declares him her husband, already thinking about making children. However, Satu firmly states that his heart belongs only to Crystal. Later that evening, Crystal thanks Satu for his efforts and decides to reward him. Satu pushes her onto the bed and she embraces him, but he falls asleep immediately. The next morning, Crystal teases Satu, implying that he was amazing last night. However, Nefritis clarifies that nothing actually happened, and Granart joins the conversation as well. They are then informed that a grand feast has been prepared outside. Granart declares that the citizens of the city will go down in history for fighting alongside the Ring King. She is satisfied with Satu's victory, not because he won, but because he never gave up. Jealous, Crystal drinks too much and collapses. Satu carries her to a room where she asks him to comfort her. Satu gently refuses, saying he doesn't want to make love in this world. Crystal, relieved, thanks him for his consideration. To lighten the mood, she offers to grant him one wish. Satu shyly asks if he can touch her chest. Crystal, flustered, agrees. However, the other girls witness this and grow jealous. Suddenly, Grenard, under the influence of catnip, pounces on Satu. Satu and his companions arrive in the Water Kingdom, home to the largest city in the realm. Prince Marmarugius leaves them abruptly, saying he has matters to attend to, which makes Satu wonder about his true intentions. Upon entering the city, a young woman approaches Satu, claiming to be his admirer. Without hesitation, she suddenly kisses him, and in doing so, he unintentionally becomes her husband. She calls him a fool, explaining that he has just married her. The wise man thanks the girl for her quick decision, while Saphir comments that befriending Crystal will likely be difficult. Since Satu is now her husband, Saphir demands that he save the kingdom, warning that if nothing is done, it will be destroyed. Meanwhile, royal guards arrive to summon Saphir back to the palace. The soldier insists that she return immediately. Nefritis is visibly frightened by this country, and Saphir notices that the streets are filled with imperial soldiers. The empire continues to expand, and the undefeated general, Sluder, personally orders Saphir to return to the castle. It is revealed that the empire is an occupying force in the kingdom. As they arrive at the palace, a sudden attack by monsters, a creature appears from underground and is easily killed by the Ring King. Witnessing this, Saphir takes note of the ring's power, while Sluder also realizes that the legends about the rings were true. Saphir then informs her father that she has already given her ring to Satu, believing that if she hadn't, he would have locked her away and forbidden her from handing it over. Unfortunately, their plan didn't work as expected. The king is urged to make a careful decision as the imperial army is dangerously close. The situation will become disastrous, and as the weight of the crisis dawns on him, he chokes and decides to rest. A girl who assists the king is introduced as the court oracle. Saphir's twin sister expresses regret over her actions, but Saphir stands by her decision, saying it was her own choice. Her sister, however, argues that as twins, she should have considered her family before marrying someone with such an appearance. Before the argument escalates, Granart interrupts, stating that even though Satu isn't the strongest warrior, he still managed to defeat her. Nefritis adds that since she doesn't understand beauty standards, she will stay out of the discussion. Crystal, however, confidently declares that Satu is incredible. Saphir reassures her sister that she no longer needs to marry the Ring King and shouldn't worry. At that moment, the prince arrives, reminding Saphir that he hasn't forgotten his promise to her. He and Saphira once swore eternal love to each other. However, Saphir realizes he never told them the full story and decides to explain. Long ago, it became clear that the land of Isserus was too small, prompting the Empire's army to invade Massa, the land of water. However, Massa's forces resisted fiercely, leading the Empire to attempt diplomacy instead. The prince was caught between the two sides. However, Marmarugius was secretly on a mission to inform the Empire of the kingdom's weaknesses, yet he never went through with it. In the Empire, useless individuals are not tolerated. Instead of fulfilling his mission, Marmarugius wrote a letter to his lover, stating that he would become the Ring King. However, he later rejected the rings, breaking his oath. Soon after, Marmarugius rushes to Saphira and begs for her forgiveness. She asks why he didn't become the Ring King, to which he replies that he felt unworthy. After he left, the Oracle appeared, and her prophecies began coming true. Their father quickly elevated her to a position of power. Sapphire tries to grab the Oracle. In response, the Oracle orders the assassination of the Ring King. Assassins move in, but Greynart knocks them out before they can strike. They flee after throwing a bomb. The next morning, Greynart reports everything to the group. Soon after, an archer attempts to kill Satu, but the wise man intercepts the arrow just in time. Later, the group enjoys a sunbath. Greynart admits that Satu doesn't seem like a warrior, but she finds herself more attracted to him. The girls begin flirting with Satu. Saphir warns him that the Oracle likely hasn't given up, and that he should remain cautious. That evening, Satu approaches Marmarugius, understanding that his relationships are complicated. The prince admits that he is plagued by guilt. Satu asks why he let him become the Ring King. The prince responds that he saw Crystal's face, filled with love for Satu. Unable to interfere, he chose to leave the rings to him. At night, Marmarugius speaks with Sluder, reminding him that they had promised not to interfere in Masa's affairs. Sluder, however, responds that sending the army was the emperor's decision, and that Marmarugius was never forgiven for refusing to become the Ring King. Sluder urges him to fulfill his father's wishes and serve his homeland. Meanwhile, the Oracle tells Marmarugius that he must steal the rings from the Ring King. The Oracle tells Marmarugius that his father will only forgive him if he steals the rings. She claims that all of her prophecies come true, including the upcoming monster attack she predicted. According to her, there is no place in this world for the Ring King. She then asks Marmarugius if he is prepared to disappoint his father once again. To help him, she gives him a sword infused with power, capable of defeating Satu. Marmarugius struggles with his decision, recalling a past conversation with his father, who once called him a failure. His father had told him that soon they would get rid of the Ring King, and he needed to prove his worth. As he walks through the palace, he spots a girl watching him before she quickly runs away. At that moment, he realizes that he has already lost everything important to him. Still unsure of what to do, he feels the sword guiding him. Meanwhile, Gisaris informs Satu and the others that he and his squad will head out to fight the monsters. He believes that Satu's power would only get in the way, so he entrusts him with guarding the castle. Later, on the streets, Crystal kisses Satu, followed by Greynart and Nefritis. Watching from a distance, Saphir comments that it's a disgusting sight. The wise man, however, explains that strong bonds bring even greater power. Marmarugius watches Satu with hatred. Gisaris and his forces report that the battle against the monsters is going well. However, a large monster begins approaching the city, prompting a debate about whether they should split their forces to delay it. Gisaris decides that the palace should handle the threat on its own. As the monster prepares to attack, Marmarugius suddenly strikes it down. He then apologizes and declares that Satu must die here. The prince announces that he will kill the Ring King and give all the rings to the Empire. Marmarugius reveals that he infiltrated their group and gained their trust, all for the sake of the Empire. He is ready to kill Satu. The wise man urges Satu not to let himself be defeated. Satu activates his magic, but the rings warn him that Marmarugius is wielding a sword that reflects magic. They also inform him that the prince's only goal is to kill the Ring King. Satu struggles to find a way to attack the prince without killing him. He notices that Marmarugius is still hesitating deep inside. Meanwhile, the girls learn about the fight and rush to witness it. Satu purposely exposes himself to an attack, stating that he knows Marmarugius won't kill him. The prince, however, begs Satu to kill him, saying that he has disappointed his beloved and failed to become the Ring King. Satu refuses, telling him that he is important to him, and that he needs him to defeat the Abyss. At that moment, an Abyss creature lunges at the girls and takes Saphira hostage. The Oracle appears, calling Marmarugius useless. The wise man declares that she is controlling the monsters and has set him up. The Oracle offers a deal. She will return Saphira in exchange for the rings. Marmarugius, conflicted, admits that part of him hates Satu. He declares that from now on, he will live only for himself. Instead of handing over the rings, he suddenly proposes to Saphira and catches her in his arms. The Oracle, furious at his betrayal, transforms into a monstrous being, revealing her true power. At that moment, Saphir kisses Satu, activating the ring's power. She summons a massive entity that effortlessly defeats the Oracle. The Oracle, realizing her loss, flees. Saphir then reverts to her normal form. Marmarugius expresses his gratitude to Satu. The king thanks them all for saving the city and praises the princes for protecting their country. He announces that the Empire will now be a strong ally. Turning to Saphir, the king apologizes, admitting that he can see she has found herself a wonderful husband. Marmarugius formally asks the king for permission to marry Saphira. The king, realizing he had been so focused on the war that he neglected his daughter's happiness, grants his blessing. Crystal, moved by the moment, says it's beautiful and wishes for the same thing in her life. Marmarugius then turns to Satu, declaring that he is next. Satu, reflecting on everything, realizes that he and Saphira Saphira had already shared intimacy. Meanwhile, Sluder tells the prince that he hopes to see him in the capital one day. Elsewhere, the Oracle reports her failure. In a last-ditch effort, she proposes merging their armies to destroy the city. However, before she can continue, she is killed. Her assassin states that they have tolerated her nonsense long enough, and that they will kill anyone who stands in their way. The girls debate who should sleep closest to Satu. They also consider that the boy should have a say in the matter. Satu states that Crystal will always be his number one, but the other girls don't mind being with him regardless. Grenart pushes him onto the bed and all the girls embrace him, falling asleep together. The next day, Satu invites Crystal on a date, wanting to explore the city with her. Crystal is excited but notes that she only wanted to walk around with Satu alone. Grenart, however, says she doesn't mind. Meanwhile, Haruto approaches the sage and requests their wages, explaining that they want to go on a date. The sage gives him money. Crystal arrives and the date begins. However, the other girls secretly decide to follow them. As they walk through the city, the townspeople cheer for the Ring King. Crystal notices that this doesn't feel much like a date, but she's happy that Satu is acting like his usual self. She is also glad that he came to the festival. The other girls feel sad that Satu is spending time with Crystal. Satu and Crystal eventually reach the lover's spot, a place where couples kiss. The other girls watch from afar. Satu is too embarrassed to kiss Crystal in public. Seeing his hesitation, the girls decide to leave, realizing that nothing will happen between them. Nefritis is happy that she got to enjoy the outing with her friends. They all eat ice cream together. Satu tells Crystal that since she was born in this world, he wants to protect it. Their worlds aren't so different, which is why he enjoys everything happening around them. Crystal thanks him for the date. Satu admits that their feelings are mutual, yet as a couple, they haven't done much. He tells her he has always liked moments like these. Crystal then says that this will be their last official date, as he has other wives and must fulfill his duty as the Ring King. Satu insists that Crystal is the only one for him, but she tells him he has no right to reject the other girl's feelings. Wanting to prove his love, Satu kisses her. Crystal tells him she doesn't want to stop, and Satu realizes that he has created a romantic mood. They are then invited to a room, and Satu is ready to spend his first night with Crystal. However, before anything can happen, she reminds him that the others are waiting for them. The sage then announces that Saphir must accompany Satu. Saphir doesn't want to go and suggests sending her sister instead. Saphir apologizes to Saphira, but her sister reassures her, saying she will protect their country. She also asks Saphir to use the power of the ring to protect Marmarugius. The group decides to travel to the capital of the dwarves. The sage knows little about them, so Saphir explains that the dwarves once fought against the Abyssal Overlord. Their city was destroyed, and they all perished. Despite this, they continue their journey to confirm whether anything remains. Upon arrival, they are shocked. The sage informs the group that they are almost at their destination. Nefritis notices the remnants of massive bridges below. Satu hopes that if anything happens, Saphir will protect them with her magic, but she admits that using magic is difficult. Realizing that the other girls don't use magic at all, she begins to wish she were back home. Marmarugius leads them to a spot where they can rest. As they set up camp, Satu wonders if the rings are truly meaningful, considering that abyssal monsters fight without them. The sage explains that the world is vast, and everyone has their own hopes and goals. Satu realizes that not many people actually believe in the rings. The power of the Abyssal Overlord is beyond words, and the sage fears that his resurrection is inevitable. According to history, Satu is supposed to collect all 5 rings. However, the sage begins to doubt himself, seeing himself as a useless old man. Upon reaching the city, they find it completely in ruins. Saphir decides to rest, but Grenart offers to carry her, embarrassing the girl. Meanwhile, Crystal hears a strange noise. Marmarugius thinks she's imagining things. They enter the palace and discover a magical puppet. The dwarves had strived for perfection in their smithing craft, and in battle, these puppets served as weapons. The moving city itself was also a legacy of the dwarves. However, they find no sign of a ring. Suddenly, the puppet activates and declares that the dwarves have vanished. It then attacks Satu. The group realizes that the puppet has become an abyssal knight. It questions why only the dwarves were fated to disappear, and then locks Satu into a one-on-one fight. The entity tells Satu that there's no point in fighting here, but Satu insists that he will fight to protect this world. One of the girls kisses him, and Satu easily defeats the creature. At that moment, the rings declare that the time has come. Resurrection is at hand. All the rings begin disappearing, signaling that everything has begun. Abyssal monsters suddenly attack the group. The sage urges them to retreat. Upon exiting the castle, they see an overwhelming number of monsters. Satu asks Saphir to transform into a dragon, but she says it's impossible due to the lack of water energy. The sage prepares for battle. The fight begins, but despite defeating many monsters, they realize they can't win. The sage, exhausted, holds the creatures back, while realizing that the Abyssal Overlord has broken free from his seal. A massive horde of monsters is approaching. He He had hoped they would collect all 5 rings before the resurrection, but now they have no chance of victory. Satu considers fleeing, but the Overlord will hunt them down wherever they go. Alabaster decides to open a portal to send them somewhere safe, but to close it he will have to stay behind. He apologizes, asking Satu to protect the princesses and take care of Crystal. Marmarugius chooses to stay with Alabaster, determined to fight for the world until the very end. The old sage apologizes to him. Satu and the girls are transported to his world. Meanwhile, the girls, unaware of their surroundings, begin trying on underwear. As they do, Satu walks in on them. The girls go shopping for clothes, and Crystal is happy that they ended up here. While having lunch at a restaurant, they think about how to return since they cannot open portals. However, no one seems too worried about their homeland. Saphir suggests they start searching for a magical place right away. The girls try to adjust to this world. Grainart asks Crystal about her relationship with Satu, but Crystal says it's up to him to decide. That night, the girls wish each other good night, and Crystal and Satu decide to sleep together. Crystal tells Satu that she found a letter from the old man, stating that they had failed. The sage left them money and transferred ownership of a house to them. Overcome with emotion, Crystal starts crying. Later, she and Satu return to school, where students bombard them with questions about where they have been. Several days pass. Nefrides starts spending time in the library, while Grainart makes new friends. Saphir remains withdrawn, lost in thought. Satu frequently visits the place where the portal had opened. Crystal notices that he goes there every day. The old man had wanted Satu to protect the ring maidens from their fate. Crystal asks him to find happiness in this world. Suddenly, a portal opens and a girl appears, having waited a long time for this moment. She introduces herself as the Earth Ring Maiden, Amber. She says she has been in this world for a very long time. The dwarves created a near-immortal replica of the Dwarven princess and sent her here with the ring. Her duty is to give it to the Ring King. She wants to marry Satu and defeat the Abyss Lord. However, Crystal protests, stating that their world is beyond saving and that Satu will not return. Understanding this, Amber says her purpose will go unfulfilled and leaves. Later, while sitting at the table, Grainart asks Satu to spend more time with them, saying life in this world has become boring. Nefrides complains that people at the library are starting to recognize her, making her uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Saphir remains at home, seemingly depressed. She then asks where they went last night. Crystal lies, saying they went shopping. Satu wonders if they should really hide Amber's existence, and Grainart overhears their conversation. The next morning, they head to school again. Amber suddenly appears from the bushes, declaring that she is fulfilling her duty by following the Ring King. She had thought he was looking for her the previous night, but in reality, he was searching for happiness. Later, while Satu is at the market, Amber approaches him again, saying that the apples in this world are incredibly delicious, before vanishing once more. That night, Satu visits her altar. Amber tells him that she can return them to the other world, but only if he becomes her husband. Once they are married, she will gain the power to send him back. Satu reflects on everything, expressing doubt, believing he is too weak. However, Amber reassures him, saying that with the power of 5 rings, they can easily seal the Abyss Lord. She promises to stay by his side until the end to discover the reason for her existence. She explains that all ring maidens live only for the Ring King, sacrificing themselves for him. Satu agrees and says he is ready to fulfill his duty. He kisses Amber and receives the 5th ring. Upon returning home, Crystal throws herself at him, saying she will eventually accept everything. She then notices the 5th ring on his finger, and realizing he intends to return to her world, begins to cry, fearing he might die there. Satu asks if the duty of a ring maiden meant nothing to her, reminding her that she left for that world after they had spent 10 years together. He promises they will do this together and she will not have to suffer alone. They will overcome everything and never lose. Crystal believes in him and finally reciprocates his feelings, deciding to do what they had talked about. They make love. Amber then appears before them, saying she has prepared a teleportation spell that can only be used once. The other girls burst into Satu's room. Satu declares that they are ready to return. Saphir begins crying, overjoyed that they are finally going back. The group successfully returns. Amber assures them that there are no monsters or creatures ahead, illuminating their path as they move forward. Eventually, they come across numerous slain soldiers and abyssal monsters. Grainart senses something, and soon they witness an ongoing battle where an army is clashing against the forces of the Abyss. Satu can feel the power of the rings. Meanwhile, archers fire arrows at the Abyss Lord. Amber warns him that if he descends from the slope, he will face the Abyss Lord one-on-one. However, Satu reassures the girls, saying that this battle is the reason he returned. Saphir entrusts him with all her power, wishing him luck, and Nefritis does the same. Grenard kisses him, Amber takes his hand, and Crystal kisses him as well, telling him that she will be waiting for him. Satu charges forward, cutting through hordes of monsters. When he finally stands before the Abyss Lord, the battle begins. He hears the voices of the rings uniting their power. Using all his strength, he defeats the Abyss Lord. However, as he kneels, exhausted, he notices that a part of the Abyss Lord still remains alive. Satu hears a voice, wondering if he is still unworthy. Before he can react, the girls rush forward to save him. The Abyss Lord lifts him using magic, but the girls manage to free him. Satu, confused, questions why they came. Suddenly, the Abyss Lord summons more creatures. The girls engage in battle, but Grenard is captured. Amber quickly uses her magic to help her break free. Satu desperately tries to activate his power but collapses, losing consciousness. He wakes up in a bed with a girl gently rousing him. Together, they head to the temple for their wedding. However, Satu then notices a black ring, feeling an ominous power emanating from it. Before he can react, a hand grabs him. Suddenly, he finds himself flying on a bird alongside the sage. Satu thought the sage had died, but he is informed that he survived. However, Satu does not understand why he failed to defeat the Abyss Lord completely. Amber explains that thanks to Smaragdi, they were able to escape. She had been watching over the sage the entire time. Amber admits that he gave her existence meaning. The sage informs them that the monsters have retreated. He praises Satu, telling him that when they teleported, the army launched an attack. The sage did his best to assist, but ultimately only managed to cover the retreat. Saphir asks about her hometown, and the sage reassures her that the city is still holding out, though the number of monsters continues to grow. Nevertheless, he is relieved that they have returned. Upon arriving in the city, Satu is warmly welcomed by the townspeople. A young girl approaches him, and he promises to protect them and save the world. The girls question the sage about why the Abyss Lord did not fall to Satu. The sage speculates that the black rings may have influenced the outcome. He states that they need to strengthen the ring's power and deepen their bond. Marmarugius appears before Satu, telling him that he has been waiting for this meeting. He speaks of the legend where the ring maidens fought alongside the ring king. Everyone must possess strength worthy of battle. Later, in their room, the girls await Satu, dressed in alluring lingerie. They tell him that he may choose whomever he desires. The next morning, Satu and Crystal walk together, discussing their training. Crystal carries flowers to her parents' grave, revealing that she has not seen her sister in 10 years. She confesses that she barely remembers what they looked like and then introduces them to her husband. Shortly after, the girls and the sage arrive. The sage informs them that a different instructor will be handling their magic training. A girl suddenly flies toward them using magic and introduces herself as Nokanatika Morion Ravri, Crystal's sister. Everyone is shocked, and Satu realizes that she is the younger sister.